Mysteries await just a page away. Ready to dive in? Welcome to The Book Reader, where stories unfold one enchanting page at a time. Subscribe now and unlock the magic.
Richard Branson. Losing My Virginity, the Autobiography. Chapter 1. 1998. 1993 was a watershed for Virgin. From that moment onwards, and for the first time, we had the luxury of money, and in Virgin we had a strong brand name, which could be lent to a wide variety of businesses. We faced uncharted territory, but at last we could afford to follow our instincts, rather than spend all our time persuading others to do so. Once we had made the lateral and surprising jump from Virgin Records to Virgin Atlantic, we could try our hand at anything. We were a long way from when we first copied out an old record contract on the houseboat and signed Mike Oldfield. Times had changed and we had £500 million in the bank. But I didn't believe in leaving it there. At this point I could of course have retired and concentrated my energies on learning how to paint watercolors, or how to beat my mum at golf. It wasn't and still isn't in my nature to do so. People asked me, "Why don't you have some fun now?" But they were missing the point. As far as I was concerned, this was fun. Fun is at the core of the way I like to do business, and it has been key to everything I've done from the outset. More than any other element, fun is the secret of Virgin's success. I am aware that the idea of business as being fun and creative goes right against the grain of convention, and it's certainly not how they teach it at some of those business schools, where business means hard grind and lots of discounted cash flows and net present values. Even though I'm often asked to define my business philosophy, I generally won't do so, because I don't believe it can be taught as if it were a recipe. There aren't ingredients and techniques that will guarantee success. Parameters exist that, if followed, will ensure a business can continue, but you cannot clearly define our business success and then bottle it as you would a perfume. It's not that simple. To be successful, you have to be out there, you have to hit the ground running, and if you have a good team around you, and more than your fair share of luck, you might make something happen. But you certainly can't guarantee it just by following someone else's formula. Business is a fluid, changing substance, and as far as I'm concerned, the group will never stand still. It has always been a mutating, indefinable thing, and the past few years have demonstrated that. But it is only when you come to write a book such as this that you discover how far you still want to go. That's how I see this book, a comprehensive account of the first 50 or so years of my life, the struggling years, but also a work and a life in progress. This book was never intended to be as dry as a balance sheet, but will, I hope, give an idea of what has been important to my life and to the people around me thus far. Virgin has expanded over the last few years, perhaps more quickly than any other European group, and has developed radically in the process. Our way of doing business may remain the same, but the context has changed dramatically. After the sale of Virgin Music and our victory over British Airways in January 1993, I realized that, for the first time in my business career, I had climbed the wall and could at last peer into the promised land. It hadn't always been possible. For anyone who starts without financial backing, there is a very thin line between success and failure. Survival is the key priority. No matter how many successes Virgin had had, there was always the danger that the cash would run out. Virgin has made money, but I have always invested it in new projects in order to keep the group growing. As a result, we had rarely had the luxury of spare cash to use as a cushion. Over the years we have clung on through 3 recessions. We have suffered losses. We have closed down some businesses, and in some instances, we had to make some staff redundant. But after 1993, no bank would ever again be able to dictate to us how to run our business. We had financial freedom. I was one of a rare breed. Most entrepreneurs don't manage to survive that far or for that long. In the process of gaining that freedom, we had to overcome all kinds of obstacles thrown without warning into our path. When we were established as a mail-order record company, and thus dependent on the post, out of the blue came a 6-month postal strike. If we hadn't reinvented ourselves, we would have gone bust. There was no choice. Within days of the strike, we had opened our first Virgin Records shop. It may have been up a dark, narrow flight of stairs above a shoe shop, and have consisted merely of some shelves, a shabby sofa and a till, but in its own small way it taught us all we now know about retailing. I can draw a straight line from that tiny shop to megastores in London, Paris, and New York. It's just a matter of scale, but first you have to believe you can make it happen. In the same way, as the record label gathered momentum through those early years, every deal was make or break. We may have failed to sign 10 cubic centimeters, but we were still willing to put the company on the line when we tried again with the next band. We launched the airline on a wing and a prayer, and when the engine blew up on our test flight, it might have been over before it had begun. We were lucky. Each time something went wrong, we were the smallest jump ahead of the banks. However tight things are, you still need to have the big picture at the forefront of your mind. The most vivid proof of this came during the depths of the recession in 1992. At the time, I was trying to raise money to install individual seatback videos in all our aircraft. I have always believed that Virgin should offer the best in-flight entertainment. We needed £10 million to install the equipment. Nobody at Virgin Atlantic could raise the necessary funding, and we were all sitting down at Crawley one day in despair, on the point of giving up, when I thought I would try one last gamble. Nervously, I picked up the telephone, called Boeing and asked to speak to the CEO, Phil Conduit. I asked him whether, if we bought 10 new Boeing 747-400s, he would throw in the individual seatback videos in economy class. Phil was amazed that anyone was thinking of buying planes during that recession, and he readily agreed. I then called Gene Pearson at Airbus and asked him the same question about the new Airbus. He agreed. After a few further inquiries, we discovered that it was easier to get £4 billion credit to buy 18 new aircraft than it was to get £10 million credit for the seatback video sets. As a result, Virgin Atlantic suddenly had a brand new fleet of planes, the youngest and most modern fleet in the industry, at the cheapest price we've ever been able to acquire planes before or since. The Virgin Group has always had a life of its own, and I have always tried to think ahead with it. When I tried to sell Student to IPC magazines back in the early 70s, they shied away from me because I started talking about all the other business opportunities one wanted to explore. A student travel company that would offer cheaper travel than the existing airlines. A student bank, because I thought that students were being ripped off when they had no income to protect them. I even wanted to hire trains from British Rail, because their tickets were so expensive, and their trains were always late. Even then I was attempting, with limited resources, to explore what was possible by wanting to go into some of these businesses and turn them upside down. At the time, it was all theoretical and beyond my capacity, but some interesting ideas emerged from the process. I may be a businessman, in that I set up and run companies for profit, but when I try to plan ahead and dream up new products and new companies, I'm an idealist. My grandiose plans didn't work for Student. But following the sale of Virgin Records, I was once again ready to start pushing at the barriers. This time it was rather different. I didn't have just a few pounds in the student biscuit tin, which we ended up spending on takeaway curries, but a treasure chest of hundreds of millions of pounds. In an intoxicating moment, everything seemed possible. We had the finance, and even more importantly, we had the name, Virgin, which already had a track record of reinventing itself. There was nothing to stop us becoming something else. I give free rein to my own instincts. First and foremost, any business proposal has to sound fun. If there is a market that is just served by two giant corporations, it appears to me that there's room for some healthy competition. As well as having fun, I love stirring the pot. I love giving big companies a run for their money, especially if they're offering expensive, poor-quality products. In the early 1990s, there were already scribblings in my notebook about the possibility of launching a range of Virgin soft drinks, led by Virgin Cola, which could take on the might of Coca-Cola, one of the world's top 10 companies. The Koch Corporation specializes in bottling own-label colas, and was looking for a brand that could have global appeal. You've got the X factor, the Y factor. You've got every factor there is, Jerry Pincer, the chief executive of Koch Corporation, said to me. People like Virgin, they trust the name. They'll buy a product because it's a Virgin product. So how about it? We've got the recipe, you've got the name. What do you say to Virgin Cola? As usual, when people warn me against doing something once my mind is made up, I grow increasingly determined to try it. In this case, we all recognized that it would be an inch-by-inch fight along the shelves of the supermarkets, but once we established that there was minimal financial risk if we failed, we decided to proceed. We knew that the product was as good as either Coke or Pepsi, and the first blind tasting we had at the local school, which was followed by many across the country, established that most people preferred Virgin Cola to the others. And so we went into Virgin Cola. Within a few months, we were selling £50 million worth of Virgin Cola across the country, and had grabbed 50% of the market in the outlets that stocked it. We went on to launch it in France, Belgium, and South Africa, and we even managed to place a Virgin Cola machine right underneath the Coke sign in Times Square, New York. This was after we'd driven a Chieftain tank through a wall of Coca-Cola and Pepsi cans, and fired at the Coke sign hanging above Times Square. Initially, Coca-Cola head office didn't take Virgin Cola seriously as a threat, so we had no opposition from them. What I didn't know was that based in Atlanta, in Coke's head office, was an English lady working in a senior position for Coca-Cola. She warned the management there that Virgin had the power and the brand to rock Coke on a worldwide basis, and she persuaded her directors to let her set up a SWAT team in England to try and stamp us out. Within days, she and her team had moved to England. Retailers were offered unbeatable terms from Coke to take their cola over ours. Smaller retailers were threatened with removal of Coca-Cola fridges. The campaign from Coca-Cola was even more potent than the Dirty Tricks campaign from British Airways to stamp out Virgin Atlantic, but Virgin Cola survived. Ironically, this very same lady now holds a senior position at Virgin's main clearing bank. Looking to the future, I had no idea whether Virgin Cola would become a global leader in soft drinks or not. But as with all of our businesses, I keep an open mind. But I do know that Virgin Cola, which has now expanded to become Virgin Drinks, is indicative of the Virgin philosophy. Beneath all the fun and razzmatazz of selling it, there is a sound business plan. The decision to launch Virgin Cola was founded on three key things: finding the right people, the positive use of the Virgin brand name, and protection of the downside. The business plan for Virgin Cola was clear. we would never lose much money selling it. It is so cheap to produce that, unlike most other products, the manufacturing cost is negligible. We could therefore balance the advertising and distribution costs directly against the sales. One look at Coca-Cola's balance sheets is enough to reveal what a profitable business it is. And with that kind of margin, we knew there must be plenty of room for someone else to come in with a decent cola to sell alongside Coke and Pepsi. Once I was convinced that we had protected the downside, which is always my first concern, the other significant question to resolve was whether the move into Virgin Cola really enhanced the Virgin brand name. Despite objections from colleagues, I was persuaded that cola has a number of attributes that people associate with Virgin: fizz, fun, and freedom. Not only that, but ours was a better, cheaper cola than the others. We thrived on the fact that we were small and a newcomer up against the two giants. And it meant that we kept the brand alive in the youth market. All right, people admitted, when they heard my defense of Virgin Cola. I can see that cola is fun. It's fizzy and profitable, and fits the Virgin image. But surely not life insurance? What on earth are you doing selling life insurance, mortgages, and investments? I have to admit that some healthy discussions about life insurance took place before we decided to launch Virgin Money. Life insurance? Everyone snorted when they heard the idea. People hate life insurance. All the salesmen seem so unscrupulous, barging into your home and taking secret commissions. It's a terrible industry. It's definitely not a Virgin kind of business. Exactly, I said. It's got potential. It is no secret that I love playing devil's advocate. I could see all the bad points about the financial services industry. The idea of setting up Virgin Life Insurance and a Virgin Bank would have horrified our original staff at Albion Street, or our customers who lounged about on the beanbags at the record shop. And yet, whenever I see people getting a bad deal, I want to step in and do something about it. Of course, this is not pure altruism. There's a profit to be made too. But the difference is that I'm prepared to share more of the profit with the customer, so that we're both better off. The maverick in me was also quietly amused that the guy who brought you the Sex Pistols could sort out your pension too. Another part of me was equally amused by the idea that we were going to set up our own bank, to give those very banks that nearly foreclosed on us a run for their money. My attention had first been brought to the financial services industry by Rowan Gormley, a venture capitalist I had asked to work for Virgin to identify new business opportunities. One of the first things he did was review the Virgin pension policy, which he told me made no sense. When he asked 6 different pension advisors to give quotes as to how best to restructure it, he was the bemused recipient of 6 different answers. I don't understand it, he told me. I've 3 degrees in finance, but none of what they're saying makes sense. Instinctively, I felt that the world of financial services was shrouded in mystery and rip-offs, and that there must be room for Virgin to offer a jargon-free alternative with no hidden catches. As with our other ventures, we needed a partner who both knew the industry and could put up the money to go alongside the Virgin name. Despite some of our past difficulties, I still believe that a 50-50 partnership is the best solution to financing. When something goes wrong, as it invariably will at some point, both partners have an equal incentive to put it right. Such is not always the case. At worst, such as with Randolph Fields and Virgin Atlantic, Virgin will buy out the partner entirely. At best, as with Sprint, our partner with Virgin Mobile in America, it stays at 50-50 and both sides remain content. In between these poles there can be many variations, and we have tried out most combinations. Ultimately, You never know what to expect when dealing with other people, and, although you might both appear to go into a project with the same enthusiasm, situations can change. Knowing when and how to renegotiate a contract is all part of the challenge of business. Virgin Money, our financial services company, started off as Virgin Direct with Norwich Union as a 50-50 partner. After Virgin entered the financial services industry, I can immodestly say it was never to be the same again. We cut out all commissions, we offered good value products, and we were practically trampled by investors in their rush to buy. We set up a new office in Norwich rather than rent a gleaming tower block in the City of London. We never employed fund managers, some of the world's most highly paid people, since we discovered their best-kept secret: they could never consistently beat the stock market index. We launched aggressively, and the initial signs were good, but, in spite of our success, we realized that we were going faster and further than was comfortable for Norwich Union. It looked like we would be 3 times the size we had originally predicted. After a short time, we arranged for Norwich Union to sell their shareholding to a partner who shared our ambitions, Australian Mutual Provident. Together with AMP and our great team at Virgin Money, we had cut a broad swathe through the financial services jungle. From a standing start in 1995, it is staggering to think that Virgin Money had become the country's most popular investment house, and 250,000 people had trusted us with over £1.5 billion. And all this had been achieved within 3 years. The success of Rowan Gormley and his vision for Virgin Money illustrates one of the great strengths of the Virgin Group. We thrive on mavericks. The quality that I recognized in Rowan when I first asked him to work for Virgin was that he would make things happen. When he started work perched at a desk on a half landing at 11 Holland Park, neither of us had any idea that a few months later, he would start up a financial services company. When, unsurprisingly, with hindsight, he alighted upon financial services, we arranged a company structure that gave him and his team a shareholding in the business and let him get on with it. Like all the managers of Virgin companies, Rowan was given a high incentive to succeed because he could clearly see the wealth that success would bring him and his team. Virgin Money may appear to have been an incongruous departure for Virgin, the rock and roll company. It was a lateral leap in the same way as it had been from records to airline. But it was still all about service, value for money, and offering a simple product. The vision I have for Virgin does not run along the orthodox lines of building up a company with a vast head office and a pyramid of command from a central board of directors. I am not saying that such a structure is wrong, far from it. It makes for formidable companies from Coca-Cola to Pearson to Microsoft. It is just that my mind doesn't work like that. I am too informal, too restless, and I like to move on. People have always asked me what the limits to Virgin are, and whether we haven't stretched the brand name beyond its natural tolerance. With monotonous regularity, they point out that there is no other company in the world that puts its name to such a wide variety of companies and products. They are absolutely right, and it remains something of which I am proud. It doesn't stop me thinking about the question nonetheless, and the answer isn't easily explicable. I have always lived my life by thriving on opportunity and adventure. Some of the best ideas come out of the blue, and you have to keep an open mind to see their virtue. Just as an American lawyer called me to suggest setting up an airline in 1984, a Swedish ballooning fanatic asked me to fly across the Atlantic with him in 1987. The proposals come in thick and fast, and I have no idea what the next one will be. I do, however, know that if I listen carefully enough, the good ideas somehow all fit into the framework that Virgin has become. By nature, I am curious about life, and this extends to my business. That curiosity has led me down many unexpected paths and introduced me to many extraordinary people. Virgin is a collection of such people, and its success rests on them. The more diffuse the company becomes, however, the more frequently I am asked about my vision for Virgin's future. I tend either to avoid this question or to answer it at great length, safe in the knowledge that I will give a different version the next time I am asked. My vision for Virgin has never been rigid and changes constantly, like the company itself. I have always lived my life by making lists. Lists of people to call, lists of ideas, lists of companies to set up, lists of people who can make things happen. Each day I work through these lists, and it is that sequence of calls that propels me forward. Back in the early 1970s, I spent my time juggling different banks and suppliers and creditors in order to play one off against the other and stay solvent. I'm still living the same way, but I'm now juggling bigger deals instead of banks. Once again, it is only a matter of scale. As anyone in my office knows when I've misplaced it, my most essential possession is a standard-sized school notebook, which can be bought at any stationery shop on any high street across the country. I carry this everywhere and write down all the comments that are made to me by Virgin staff and anyone else I meet. I make notes of all telephone conversations and all meetings, and I draft out letters and lists of telephone calls to make. Over the years, I have worked my way through a bookcase of them, and the discipline of writing everything down ensures that I have to listen to people carefully. Flicking back through these notebooks now, I see some ideas that escaped me. I was asked to invest in a board game called Trivial Pursuit and a wind-up radio. But when I turned down the offer to become an underwriting name at Lloyd's Insurance, my guardian angel must have been looking after me. Whenever I'm on a flight or a train or in a record store, I walk around and ask the people I meet for their ideas on how to improve the service. I write them down, and when I get home, I look through what I've written. If there's a good idea, I pick up the phone and implement it. My staff were maddened to hear that I had met a man on the airport bus who suggested that we offer onboard massages. And please, could they organize it? They tease me and call it Richard's straw poll of one. But time and again, the extra services that Virgin offers have been suggested to us by customers. I don't mind where the ideas come from as long as they make a difference. I also insist that we continually ask our staff for any suggestions they might have, and I try my hand at their jobs. When I tried pushing a trolley down the aisle of a jumbo, I found I crashed into everyone. When I talked to the crew about this, they suggested that we introduce a more waitress-style service and keep the trolleys to a minimum. As it turned out, by getting rid of trolleys altogether in upper class, we were able to use up some of the aisle space to provide the longest and largest seats in the air. My vision for Virgin was ultimately summed up by Peter Gabriel, who once said to me, "It's outrageous. Virgin is becoming everything. You wake up in the morning to Virgin Radio, you put on your Virgin jeans, you go to the Virgin Megastore, you drink Virgin Cola, you fly to America on Virgin Atlantic. Soon you'll be offering Virgin births, Virgin marriages, Virgin funerals. I think you should rename Virgin the In and Out Company. Virgin will be there at the beginning and there at the end." As ever, Peter, who is an astute businessman as well as a gifted musician, was very close to the truth. He had no idea at the time that we had 200 people down in Eastbourne working on a range of Virgin cosmetics, another team designing a range of Virgin clothes, or that we were just about to bid for 2 British rail franchises that would make us the largest train operator in Britain. I doubt that we'll ever go into virgin funerals, but virgin births has a certain ring to it. If there's a good business plan, limited downside, good people and a good product, we'll go for it. In some ways it all boils down to convention. As you might have noticed, I do not set much store by such so-called wisdom. Conventionally, you concentrate on what you are doing and never stray beyond fairly narrow boundaries when running a company. Not only do I find that restrictive, I also think that it's dangerous. If you only run record shops and refuse to embrace change, when something new like the internet or MP3 is launched, you will lose your sales to the person who makes use of the new medium. Even in the heady days of 1999, I felt it was far better to set up your own internet operation, to which your record shops lost business, than lose it to somebody else's internet operation. Various outside advisors did try to get us to launch an internet site, bizarrely suggesting that we do this without using our name. This is the age of current bun, handbag and jam jar, they said. They just didn't understand brands. This partly explains the jigsaw of companies we have. As well as protecting each other, they have symbiotic relationships. When Virgin Atlantic starts a flight to South Africa, I find that we can launch Virgin Radio and Virgin Cola there. In the same way, we can use our experience in the airline industry to make buying train tickets easier and cheaper. We can draw on our experience of entertaining people on planes to entertain people on trains. Despite employing around 40,000 people, Virgin is not a big group. It's a big brand made up of lots of small companies. Our priorities are the opposite of our large competitors. Convention dictates that a company should look after its shareholders first, its customers next, and last of all worry about its employees. Virgin does the opposite. For us, our employees matter most. It just seems common sense to me that, if you start off with a happy, well-motivated workforce, you're much more likely to have happy customers. And in due course the resulting profits will make your shareholders happy. Convention also dictates that big is beautiful, but every time one of our ventures gets too big we divide it up into smaller units. I go to the deputy managing director, the deputy sales director, and the deputy marketing director, and say, "Congratulations. You're now the MD, the sales director, and the marketing director of a new company." Each time we've done this, the people involved haven't had much more work to do, but necessarily, they have a greater incentive to perform, and a greater zest for their work. The results for us have been terrific. By the time we sold Virgin Music in 1992, we had as many as 50 subsidiary record companies, and not one of them had more than 60 employees. But there is little point in looking back, except to note that, since then, Ken Berry consolidated and made Virgin Music the most profitable jewel in EMI's crown, before moving on early in 2002. For us, we were now free to start again with V2 Records, using the same techniques and skills. Our first signing may not have made quite the same impact as Mike Oldfield, but the Stereophonics were still named Best Newcomers in the Brit Awards for 1998, and have gone on to great things since. The Virgin way has been to develop many different ventures and grow organically. For most of our companies, we have started from scratch, rather than merely buying them ready-made. We want each of the Virgin subsidiaries to be an efficient, manageable size. When it comes to setting up new companies, one of my advantages is that I don't have a highly complicated view of business. When I think about which services I want to offer on Virgin Atlantic, I try to imagine whether my family and I would like to buy them for ourselves. Quite often it's as simple as that. Of course, life becomes more complicated when you move away from organic growth. In recent years, Virgin has bought companies to add to the ones that we have set up. The purchase of MGM Cinemas was the first big acquisition we made, and we also bought two substantial British rail train franchises. While we were able to fix the cinema chain relatively quickly, before selling it to the French company UCI, the trains are a much longer-term prospect. In some ways, we became a victim of our own success, in that the train passengers expected that, as soon as Virgin had taken over the running of the trains, miraculous change would take place. Unfortunately, the logistics of the task were against us. Our two train companies had 3,500 employees, and we needed to build a completely new fleet of trains, and at the same time negotiate with Railtrack over how they could upgrade the tracks and signaling. Despite a difficult time in the railway industry as a whole, we're confident that Virgin Rail will come to be seen as one of the best things Virgin ever did with its brand.
And that marks the end of the current chapter. Thank you for listening to The Book Reader. Stay tuned for the next episode tomorrow. Please subscribe for updates.